So the purpose of this short video is just to give you some insight into how you might go about presenting your poster to a small audience of people. What you shouldn't do is take this poster as a good example of how to produce a poster. There are lots of faults with this poster, but we're just trying to give you a sense of how you speak and use the elements in a poster to illustrate the points that you're trying to make.
So, Mike, I can see this poster is about wind farms. It looks interesting. What's it about, Mike?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Martin. This was an interesting study which was funded by the Crown Estate, and the purpose of the study was to try and understand how common scoter, which are a sea duck, might respond to the construction of wind farms in Liverpool Bay. Now, as we all know, offshore renewable energy has become a much more important thing for the UK to secure its future energy security. And what we see when we look in this map over here is we see the red areas which show the round 1 proposed wind farms in Liverpool Bay, and we see the blue areas which are the round 2 proposed wind farms in Liverpool Bay that will be constructed sometime later. Now the potential problem for common scoter is that when they're in Liverpool Bay over the winter period, they spend all their time at sea where they feed on shellfish that live on the seabed. So the common scoter is a diving sea duck, and that means it's depth limited, so the potential extent of its habitat is limited by water depth. So that means the birds have limited options in terms of where they can actually go to feed. So the problem from the scoter population point of view is that when you start to construct wind farms, because these birds do not like anthropogenic structures and disturbance from human activities, they could be excluded from these important areas of seabed where perhaps the birds feed. So our role in the project was to establish where exactly the prey of the common scoter were distributed across Liverpool Bay. And what we did in order to establish that was we undertook a very large-scale survey using the Prince-Madoc across Liverpool Bay, where we sampled 169 sites and we analysed the content of bivalves in the samples that we took. And from that we generated this map which shows us the density concentration of those bivalves across Liverpool Bay. And what that enables us to do is to understand where the hot spots of prey are and where the areas of least prey abundance actually occur. Then, having done that, we can also combine that with information about the distribution of the birds. So we see here these black dots. The black dots show the concentration of common scoter bird sightings made from overflights that flew across Liverpool Bay in a systematic fashion. And we can see the main aggregations of common scoter are off the North Wales coast, off Rhyl and Abergele, and off Blackpool on an area called Shell Flat. Now what you can see is that the Shell Flat proposed wind farm coincides with one of the main concentrations of common scoter. The other thing that's interesting when we look back to the prey map is that you see one of the main concentrations of prey occur off the coast of the Wirral. And the coast of Wirral is an area where one of the proposed wind farms was due to be located. However, when we look to see where the birds are concentrated, we see that there are no birds that occur off the north of Wirral. So the question is, why was that the case? Well, we looked for other explanatory variables, such as the occurrence of boat traffic in the area. So this map down here shows you the map distribution of concentrated boat shipping activity. And you see, not surprisingly, that there are 3 main lines of shipping activity coming into the River Mersey, which of course is a major navigation channel. And we see quite a lot of boat traffic from Heysham across to the Isle of Man and Belfast. So the thing that we can note from this is when we overlay the distribution of the birds, we see that the birds are placed well away from the boat traffic disturbance to the north, and also the majority of the boat traffic avoids the birds in their disposition off the North Wales coast. But the thing that's very interesting is we see a very heavy concentration of marine traffic around the area of the Wirral, and of course that's the area where there were no birds associated. So, understanding these parameters, we were then able to input these into a behavioural model, and the model basically was modelled the behavioural responses of the birds in response to the different sources or different environmental parameters that were important for them. So in other words, in relation to the concentration of prey types and in relation to the disturbance created by marine traffic. And what we were able to do was build different scenarios in the model with different combinations of wind farms to see what cumulative combination of wind farms might lead to a population change in the common scoter. And the main finding that came out of that was that you could construct all of these wind farms and have absolutely no effect whatsoever on the population of common scoter until you added in this large wind farm development on Shell Flat. And obviously that's maybe not quite so surprising because this co-occurs with an area of the highest concentration of scoter. So the conclusions from our findings were if you were to construct Shell Flat, this would have a negative and detrimental effect on the population of common scoter in Liverpool Bay. The birds would be displaced away from the main feeding area, an area that was used by a large proportion of the population. And the outcome of that was that the wind farm developers then moved the proposed site for development to the north to avoid the main concentration of birds.
That's a really interesting study, Mike. Would you comment on the fact that you took nearly 6 minutes to do this one, or any other factors that you want to bring in?
Well, naturally, Martin, I would like to have had more time to practice more thoroughly and refine my skills so that they were much better.
That's a really good idea. Do you think that we should tell the students to practice the timing so that they get an extra minute or something for questions in the end?
It's always good to have questions at the end.
Thank you, Mike, for a very interesting and interactive presentation. I hope that the students find it really useful to have this. Thank you.
You're welcome.